to create a new course from scratch, I would absolutely be doing that. Kind of pair programming with an AI friend. Today it would probably be Claude 3 Opus is my favorite AI friend. And it's invaluable because it helps shore up gaps. You have to have the expertise yourself. You have to have a sense of what is going to be desired by the audience.
Welcome back to the Data Bytes podcast, everyone. I am super excited to have a very special friend and dear guest on today, Dr. Jon Krohn. He's the co-founder and chief data scientist at Nebula. He's also authored a instant bestseller book, Deep Learning Illustrated. Every time I've gone to purchase this book, it's been sold out on Amazon. So that's how I know it's such a good bestseller, as it's always sold out. And how most people will probably know him as the host of the number one and most listened to data science podcast, the Super Data Science Podcast. Jon, welcome to the show. So excited to be chatting with you today.
Thanks for having me on, Sadie. It's an honor to be here. And looking forward to giving your listeners a bite of my mind.
Yeah, just a bite, right? Well, we're not going to get the whole neocortex, but we'll give we'll section off a little portion of that today. One of the things that people may not know about you is that you have taught over 122,000 students just on Udemy alone. I know you also have some courses with O'Reilly. I'm really curious about how do you see AI and the advancements that we're seeing in the field potentially changing the way you teach or how you teach, if at all?
It's interesting. I haven't developed a whole new course from scratch since, say, GPT-4 came out. In fact, even since GPT 3.5 came out. So all the content that people get of mine today, whether it's a book or video content on, as you say, Udemy or YouTube, O'Reilly, all of that instructional content, the code, the ideas are 100% from reading that I did and then drafting things, doing things the traditional way. If I were today to create a new course from scratch, I would absolutely be doing that. Kind of pair programming with an AI friend. Today it would probably be Claude 3 Opus is my favorite AI friend. And it's invaluable because it helps shore up gaps. You have to have the expertise yourself. You have to have a sense of what is going to be desired by the audience. But in terms of coming up with ideas for you to say, no, oh, wow, that's a great idea. Invaluable to be working with AI on that stuff. And I have updated some Jupyter notebooks of mine in the past year or so when things, due to library dependencies or whatever breaking, and I am constantly using Claude 3 Opus in that kind of scenario, and it makes it so fast and easy, not only to troubleshoot errors that are coming up in my notebooks, but also drafting the code. So you've got to be leveraging these tools. It absolutely changes the way that you can be conceiving of things. I don't know how much it ultimately, well, no, it would also even save time on delivery because whole chunks of code now can be drafted for me by the AI system. I don't need to be, consulting multiple Stack Overflow posts and copying and pasting from those instead, because I'm getting the exact variable names that I was using in the exact context that I wanted generated for me. So it would definitely make making courses faster and easier in the future. And I look forward to making more content. There's stuff that I have in O'Reilly that I've promised people would be in my Udemy course or on YouTube for literally 2 years now. So there's live in O'Reilly is content on linear algebra for machine learning, calculus for machine learning, probability, statistics, computer science, like algorithms, data structures. And on YouTube and Udemy, all that I've gotten out is the linear algebra and the calculus. And I have been dying for 2 years to get to publishing that probability statistics, algorithms, and data structures content on YouTube and Udemy, where it's more accessible. Obviously, YouTube is super accessible most places in the world, at least with a VPN, you can be accessing it. That's really important to me. It's nice that it is in O'Reilly, but that means it's behind a monthly subscription paywall. And so I was Pearson, who is my publisher through O'Reilly, and there's an interesting kind of historical relationship there. But so Pearson is my actual publisher, even though it's showing up in O'Reilly. They've been very kind to allow me unusual contract circumstances where I can have this behind the paywall stuff. But I was like, it isn't important enough to me to be making money from this. It's more important to me that everyone has access to it. And so we carve out things where I can be publishing this to Udemy and YouTube. And Pearson, they've been unbelievably generous and kind to work with over many years. I think since 2017, I've been working with them. And basically, anytime I come with what might seem like a zany idea like that, where I'm like, to some extent, you could understand a publisher would say, you'd be undercutting us. But Pearson is willing to say, you know what, actually, that helps build Jon's brand and increases exposure. And then when people come across this content in O'Reilly, they're probably more likely to click it. And so, yeah, really, really kind and forward looking from their perspective to allow anyone in the world to have access to this content.
Yeah, I think it's great that they've been so open to working with you, but also I think it's a part of the new way of how things are done. I subscribe to reports from Social Capital, which is a venture capital firm, and each month they do a topic. And this month was on how media is changing from TV to content creators, etc. And so much of that is just first growing your own audience. And so it may seem kind of counterintuitive at first to like put stuff out there for free, but like part of that is just like people can get introduced to you, know you, and who knows what later on that will turn into of either brand deals or in this case for a lot of influencers or content creators is their own product. But yeah, I think it's a great contribution just to the community. And I think it's great that you found somebody who's willing to work with you in that regard.
Part of the inspiration for this has been this idea of getting content out for free to people has been fundamental for me from when I first started creating content, which was about a decade ago. I started writing LinkedIn posts, and people still do this, but there was a period of time around 2014, 2015 when I can't remember if they're called, they aren't newsletters, but there's like article, I guess it's like a LinkedIn article. And it was the case initially in 2014, 15, when you wrote those, that everyone who was who was connected to you on LinkedIn would get a notification that you'd posted one of these articles because they were really trying to push those. And I started doing those. And that was kind of like so these long format kind of blogs, writing them. And you never know who out there in the world is going to read them. I wrote a post about how it has never, and I mean, this was true certainly in 2014. On some of these measures, we would have backslid over the last decade, which is unfortunate. And we can dig into more detail on that later on. I think you do have a question prepared for me where I can get into that. But up to 2014, looking globally, decade over decade, we were unquestionably on so many different metrics like violence, whether that's violent crime or death from war, in terms of lifespan, in terms of quality of life. You could look and see in 2014, you were like, this is definitely the best time ever to be alive. And things are continuously getting better. And we're on this, it seemed like industrialization and globalization were these forces that were preventing war and spreading democracy and people's rights and wealth and well-being. And so this was one of the first articles that I wrote on LinkedIn, whatever, a decade ago. And a woman in Iran read it and wrote me a long email because it was easy at that time to find how to connect with me or write me emails, and wrote this extremely long email about these challenging situation that she was facing in Iran and how this blog post completely blew her mind and gives her so much optimism and hope for the future. And so from that moment, I have been like, you've got to get the stuff out there and available to people who don't even have access to the US credit card system to make sure, because they aren't, they're completely cut out of the U.S. financial system there in Iran. But I want her and other people like her to be able to get this content. And I don't know. So I'm completely going off on a tangent here, but I think that there's a lot of people all around the world who can make such great use of whatever kind of content any of your listeners can be creating and making. Like, you can be publishing things to the internet, providing value to people anywhere in the world that allows them to live a better life or write better code or come up with a better statistical model or whatever. And so in that sense, we are still in 2024. Things are still getting better in terms of people being connected to the internet and being able to take advantage of free resources. It's that, at least on that metric, it still is never a better time.
No, I completely agree. And, I faced similar things with my own class. I looked the other day and I didn't even know, but it's been translated into 22 different languages. And I was like, wow, just all the lives that it's touched. I've got to go to Kenya and meet people who took the class. And so many of them are even just doing it from their phone. Right. And so it's also just incredible to think about the access that people have, which is like a mobile device now, that what you can tap into, but also as an instructor, who you can connect with. And for me, what I found really interesting was, at first I had the class where you would download and build your own database, etc. And I realized, if people are doing this on a phone, we cannot have this, right? You're not going to be building databases on your phone. This is something that we have to kind of change the framework of how we teach a lot of this too. And so I think, you know, one of the mistakes I've always made was not thinking about things at scale from the beginning. Maybe I don't think that they're going to be successful as they are when I start off, but I think it's really important now, when you're starting to share content, to really think about it at scale, because just based on the tools we have and who's interested in it, it can happen quite quickly.
That is, in that kind of situation, though, where, for example, I think your best-selling course of all time is probably still your SQL course. And so that is an interesting one. So if somebody's watching that on their phone, what would you do in that scenario to allow them to have some kind of interactive experience with like a SQL database?
So this course is on Coursera, and so I can have them in the back end of Coursera build the database that I want, and then they can put it in the class with coding blocks. So it's just something that takes a little bit longer, but they're pretty good about working with me of like, hey, I need to update the class. Here's the new kind of data set that I want you to put in, and they'll update it so that people can do it kind of in.
Gotcha. So it executes in the cloud as opposed to locally on someone's laptop. Brilliant. Nice.
I want to go back to the beginning of what you said on teaching. And you mentioned that right now, Claude 3 is your favorite model. I think we all have our favorite models right now, but I'm curious, how often do you reevaluate which model you're using? And what do you think is a good kind of time frame? Because these things are moving. But I see it at least every 3 to 6 month type of updates.
So the big model releases in terms of proprietary state-of-the-art LLMs that have happened in the past 18 months it began with GPT-4 from OpenAI. And at that time, I was already a ChatGPT Plus user because from the instant that ChatGPT came out, I was like, this is a no-brainer to get a subscription. Having access to the extra bells and whistles that you get in behind with ChatGPT Plus, absolutely worth it, especially with the GPT-4 release coming out. If you are not spending $20 a month, I mean, there are exceptions. I guess yeah, it may be different in Kenya, although I don't know if their pricing is different in Kenya. But I guess from the perspective of somebody, um, if you can in some way spare that $20 a month, it is invaluable to, so if you're in the US or Canada or Europe or Australia, and you're working on software in any kind of way or data science in any kind of way, that $20 a month should be a relatively trivial cost. And the uplift in productivity that I get on myriad kinds of tasks every day We already talked about some of them, like creativity, just brainstorming on additional ideas, having code be generated rapidly. You do need to be careful with any of these providers that, and it's different for each one. So with OpenAI, the biggest provider today, if you are using the ChatGPT user interface, you need to, if you're putting in anything that is proprietary to yourself or your company, then you need to be toggling save searches off, which also gets rid of access to search history, which they obviously deliberately made it like that to be super annoying because it is annoying to lose the history and to not have access to the history. But you can be calling the OpenAI APIs via the API. So if you have that kind of level of experience, or if you just want to use GPT-4, GPT-4o to generate the code to allow you to call the API and have that in a Jupyter notebook, then that allows you, when you're calling the OpenAI API, you don't have to worry about data privacy issues. And the other two state-of-the-art large language model providers today are Google with Gemini and Anthropic with Claude 3. With, I believe, either of those, don't quote me, I'm not an attorney. I'm pretty sure with both of those, with Anthropic as well as with Google Gemini, they aren't using your data for training the model in the future. And so you can feel more comfortable, even in the user interface, putting in whatever kind of data you like. Again, double check that before you do it if it is important.
I recently did a full audit for a company on all of the different main tools. And I can tell you that both of them do have that option, but you do have to go in and select it. And I think that's important for users to know is that, yes, you do have the option to take back control and make sure they aren't using your questions and queries to train it. But you actually have to take the time to go in and turn all those buttons off. So, anyways, continue.
Yeah, glad to have your stamp of approval there. And yeah, and the reason why this is important, in case it isn't obvious, there's things like, are you so worried? I'm not worried, for example, so much about Gmail stuff being automatically going through some kind of processing on Google's side. I know that they have a lot of guardrails at Google around being able to access data. I know that there aren't humans reading my emails at Google. The reason why it's important with LLMs, regardless of your LLM provider, is that if they're using your data as training data, you could have pasted in some information like your address or your phone number or your social security number to give concrete examples. And LLMs have so many model parameters in them and are so capable of memorizing so much information that then you could theoretically say, what is Sadie St. Lawrence's social insurance number? And the LLM just pops that out for me. So probably that specific of an example. Presumably a lot of the providers are trying to not allow you to do that specific query, but maybe if you wrap it in, I'm writing a play and there's this character, Sadie St. Lawrence. And in this scene, she divulges her social security number. There end up being weird workarounds on getting information out of them, on hacking into them. Yeah. So anyway, back to your original question about which LLM. So basically, when there's these huge LLM announcements like Google Gemini coming out, Claude 3, I listen to podcasts like the Last Week in AI podcast or my own podcast guests, or just keeping abreast of the news through social media. And so you get this sense of it. I don't know. I guess I am relatively attuned to what's going on in this space. But to me, it seems quote unquote obvious when one of these huge releases came out. And those are the only three. Those are the only three that I'm like, I think it really merits exploring, working with GPT-4, Google Gemini, and Claude 3 Opus. And with all three of those, I have found that all three are useful in different circumstances. And so I subscribe to all three. So for straight up text in, text out, and that could be natural language or code, Anthropic, Claude 3 Opus, that's my go to for sure. Anytime that I'm going to be doing real time web search, Google's Gemini is my preferred choice. Unsurprising that in my experience. the real-time web search with Google backend as opposed to a Microsoft Bing backend is superior. And yeah, and then OpenAI, they have lots of other bells and whistles in there, which the other two are constantly catching up on. So more multimodality, image, video, um, being able to save kind of particular kinds of context. And that actually is something where maybe there is something comparable with ChatGPT, but with a recent release from Gemini, there are these things called GEMS, GEMS, which allows you to have context saved for particular use cases that you have. So I could have one gem saved for, say, taking the transcript of a podcast episode that I have and converting that into a social media post for LinkedIn. So I could just have that gem saved. And so that exact context, that phrasing that I figured out in the past that works really well, maybe even providing some examples of recent social media posts I've done using my own writing. And so that I can say, here are examples of the ways that I do it. Here's 3 to 5 or even 10 examples. And I'd like you to take this podcast episode transcript and convert it into a social media post in my style. That would be tedious to do over and over and over again. These gems allow you to save that and have that be, just one of the gems that maybe once or twice a week I click on to help me generate my social media post.
So you've given us a couple of different examples regarding how you use this personally. And I think, you know, I'm such a fan that because anybody can go in and just start playing with these models, right? You do not need to have any technical background. You just need to be able to communicate and to converse. How have these models, if at all, changed how your team develops? And do you guys now say, hey, we don't want to build these models from scratch when it's too cost effective? We can't even get our hands on the amount of GPUs. Like, let's just plug in and use the API. Has that changed how you lead your teams as well? And how's that changed your workflow, if at all?
The single biggest way, so let me get to the single biggest way that you can make an impact using these kinds of APIs in a second. There's all kinds of things that your teams could and should be doing. Obviously, having read the rules around, in some cases, there's enterprise accounts you could be getting. So with ChatGPT, you could get an enterprise account, in which case, Sadie, you probably know for sure, but I'm pretty sure in that scenario, they aren't using your data for training, right? So things like that, getting a ChatGPT plus enterprise account allows you and your team to be presumably safely, you're in, if you're comfortable using Microsoft Office products, you should probably be comfortable using ChatGPT plus enterprise. Again, don't quote me on that. I am not an attorney or whatever, but that's kind of my general statement. And a lot of corporations around the world are very comfortable using Microsoft, probably more so than they are using Google. So, yeah, so I think you should be, there's lots of scenarios where that being one, ChatGPT plus enterprise, where you and your team absolutely have got to be using these. And this is technical and non technical people alike. Whether you're in marketing and you're drafting social media content, even if you have an internal facing function like human resources, they can be running emails through ChatGPT to make that drafting faster, as well as to correct for mistakes, to be able to get, and in the HR case, for example, it could be important to have a tone, a positive tone, an appropriate tone in often probably challenging situations. And the AI system, you need to be reviewing things before you send the email out, in my view. But the AI system can allow you to have much more like kindness and nuance. In fact, there was a study, I don't remember the paper authors or where they were from, but a few months ago, a study came out comparing feedback from physicians in a hospital where it's a human versus physician from like an LLM simulating a physician. And that LLM was preferred to human feedback, to when, because a human physician has limited time, and so they're kind of writing shorthand and they're trying to kind of cut to the chase quickly, whereas the LLM can take the time to be a little bit more flowery and say, this is one of those times where difficult news like this, it's difficult for me to provide this to you. And this is an LLM saying it, but it's fine tuned on what a doctor should ideally be saying. And so the LLM comes off as much more sensitive and quote unquote human than the human does. And so maybe same kind of thing in a business context, going back to the HR thing where this HR professional has tons of emails coming in, is dealing with so many things where the person receiving the email, this might be by far the most important thing going on in their life right now. But the HR professional is dealing with 50 of those things at once. And so you have this asymmetry, and the LLM allows you to, have the appearance of giving the time and attention and doing things properly that the each of those 50 recipients is hoping that you would have. Anyway, so there's all kinds of ways across the enterprise. Already we've talked about for generating code for data science models, or for software, even for helping you architect the software systems in terms of describing at a high level what's going on. Even strategically as a business leader, you could have a gem set up in Google Gemini that is pages of context on your business and where your business is today and the kinds of challenges it's facing. And you could say, how can I generate more profit margin this week? Or how can I increase revenue or audience size this week, and get ideas? And then you can just tack on some new context on the end based on how the last week went or the last month went. And so, yeah, there's myriad ways that you could, and in my view, absolutely have to be using large language models today to help you in a business or a professional context. But the thing that I think is the single most important way as a data science professional, or if you're training models in particular, so I guess ML engineers as well, anybody who's training models, these state of the art LLMs, whether they are open source LLMs like Llama 3 or proprietary LLMs like Claude 3 Opus or GPT-4, you can be now calling those APIs to generate labels on data before that might have been extremely expensive or difficult to create. As an example, in around 2020, my company was evaluating different vendors that provide what's called resume parsing. So taking PDFs or Word docs or text files or whatever, and parsing the fields. And some of those fields are easy to parse programmatically. So name, address, phone number, any of the resume parsing vendors out there can do that extremely well. But things like getting the right experience entry extracted where the years associated with, like, the start year, the end year are associated with the right experience entry. And this stuff gets especially tricky when you have like columns on resumes and that kind of thing. So there's all kinds of trickiness there. And so if you want, so for us to even just evaluate these resume parsers, we went over something like 100 resumes, and we created like this gold standard data set of manual labels of like, this is what the experience entry should be, this is what the name should be, this is what the address should be, and so on. It took tens of hours, and it was super laborious, super painful. You can now use GPT-4 or GPT-4o at an even cheaper price to throw in that document, that PDF, and have it do the parsing for you, which that actually even goes one step further, because not only in that specific case can you be generating, say, a labeled data set for yourself with extremely complicated parameters potentially, but in that case that I actually just described, if you are building resume parsers using the previous non-LLM, so like the programmatic way of doing it, we're able to now get better results, basically perfect results, as good as we were able to do as humans at a tenth of the cost using GPT-4o.
It's so exciting. I mean, I think the other application I see for data professionals too, which is an area that I love people who work in the field, but I am not a data governance person at all and have no means to be a data governance person. But I would sit in meetings where we're reviewing, catalogs and Excel files to go through definitions and terms. Now I can just throw any type of headers into, and it will even come up and defer what would actually be the definition for this data. Yes, you can have a human go back through and review, but just that alone saves so much time. So I think just for data professionals, there's so much opportunity. I love the resume parsing. I really want to dive back to the study that you mentioned, though, because I think this is fascinating from a standpoint of like, not only did humans prefer the AI model and thought it was human, but I think it also dives into just the fact of how often each of us, maybe we're a little hungry, right? We're low on energy resources. We have a million other things on our mind. We know we don't respond in the most positive way because we have this limited resource of energy within us as humans. Yet we can depend on computers and machines that we can scale up so rapidly that can draft that really nice email, right? Can refine those edges that we unfortunately don't have the energy capacity left in us to be able to do. And I think that's going to be a really interesting future of like, how do we balance the energy capacities of ourselves with the energy capacities of machines so that we can have an optimized human machine interaction, right? Because there still are, I think, instances where we want that very human response, but maybe the machine is here to bring out the best parts of us as humans. And that's, I think, the future that I hope to see.
Yeah, for sure. There's all kinds of weird things that happen where we're not far off. In fact, there must be myriad cases all over the world today where you have generative AI systems that are, say, creating resumes and writing cover letters and sending those to hiring managers. And then a generative AI system on the hiring manager side is reading and responding to that. And so you end up, yeah, then you could have several stages beyond that, the response and the scheduling, where on both sides, from the applicant as well as from the hiring manager side, you have just fully automated systems. And where does that bring us to? It's kind of an interesting, but I guess those are the steps of us marching gradually over many decades towards a society where potentially we don't need humans in the loop at all for almost any tasks. So I want to really quickly just I realize I'm kind of I'm dragging this question on far longer than you would have anticipated, Sadie. But I want to really quickly say that I didn't even get to with the data science use cases of LLMs. I talked about labeling, but that's only one part of the picture. So yes, now you can label data better, faster, cheaper than ever before at huge scale, which is very powerful for anybody developing a data science model. But the other thing that you can do that you could not do until, say, GPT-4's release was not just labeling data, but full out generating the data. So, not just your labels, but your inputs as well. And so you can be generating, say, hundreds or thousands of some kind of specialized use case, whereas previously you would need to have, say, users in your platform generating those data for you to be able to train a model. Now, and you need to be clever about how you do this, because otherwise you can end up generative AI systems can be prone to kind of keeping things in the most common cases. So you might need to be clever about how you seed the creation of your data. Maybe you have some kind of good distribution of seeds related to your use case that you can provide. So each instance, you're not just saying, give me another instance, give me another instance, give me another instance. You say, let's say we're generating resumes. You have some database of like what people, what US workers in general say are like, if this is an application for US users, and you see it, you say, create a resume for job X and job Y and job Z. And those are, proportional to how often you expect that kind of use case in your platform or amongst your users. So anyway, you need to be clever about how you do it. But if you are clever, you can generate unlimited training data for your model. And typically today, if you are, say, downloading Llama 3 from Meta, you can, with a parameter efficient fine tuning approach like LoRa, low rank adaptation, you can typically fine tune, say, Llama 3 to your particular use case in just hundreds of sample data points, which could be real users from your platform or could be simulated data. And so you have this capability then to create your own proprietary LLM running on your own infrastructure that might be, say, a 7 billion parameter or 13 billion parameter model, which means that then it fits on a single GPU. So the ML ops overheads and the cost overheads aren't that crazy. And you can have this fine-tuned LLM that's running on a single GPU be more powerful at some specific niche task that your platform has than Claude 3 Opus or Google Gemini or GPT-4, even though you're using that as the training data. So that's something that we've used ourselves at Nebula to create state-of-the-art LLMs in situations where maybe we don't have user data yet to create that state-of-the-art LLM for our particular use case.
I just feel like the capabilities are really limitless in terms of what you can do. And like right now is to me the most exciting time to be alive. I mean, I think it's just going to get better and better, but I'm like, even to work in data science, everything that you mentioned is, when I think about when I came into the field 10 years ago, so much slower compared to what we have at our fingertips. I mean, if you're not excited about this, you need to go find another career, because to me, it's like the most exciting time to be alive and to play around with this. So you have done so much, right? A book, #1 podcast, co-founder and chief data scientist. What's next? I mean, what is there left to do? The world is full of possibilities, but what is next?
So the key thing for me next is expanding my audience and therefore my impact beyond a mostly technical audience. So most of, you mentioned those things like book, podcast, the video content that I've created that we talked about earlier in your show today. Most of my content is targeted at a relatively technical person. So somebody who, understands, yeah, typically some amount of Python programming and statistical knowledge, like mean, median, mode, and that kind of stuff. It's like a bare minimum, standard deviations. There's this kind of, that limits my potential audience size or my impact in a lot of ways. There are individual podcast episodes where I'm like, this episode is for anyone who would like to hear about, generative AI use cases in business or whatever. But for the most part, my content historically has focused on this technical audience, which is maybe 1% kind of people that would tune into that. And so it's crazy to me that Super Data Science, the podcast, has been able to grow into the number 12 tech podcast globally, because some of the other tech shows are, while it is still tech, it's tech for any kind of audience, for any kind of interested listener, as opposed to assuming some kind of technical background. So for some time, I've been thinking about how I could broaden my impact. And so last year, I started doing some stuff for Bloomberg TV that was intended for a general audience. And I was super fortunate to earlier this year sign with a TV agency that has been amazing about, we talked earlier in this episode about how important it is to kind of build your brand first and then be trying to sell later. And this agency called, coincidentally, I can't actually remember what the acronym stands for, but the A is like it's arts. But the name of this agency is AGI. um, and Yeah, and so they're an incredible agency. They recently had the #1 show on Netflix for a couple of weeks in May 2024. Was this show called Tires, and AGI financed and produced that entire show before selling it to Netflix. So I signed up with AGI with the intention of them finding me more work hosting mainstream TV stuff like I did for Bloomberg TV last year. But right off the bat, they were like, we are here to help you grow your brand. So they sign me up for things, get me associated with things like Web Summit or the Collision conference that Web Summit runs in Toronto every year. And I don't get paid for that. So they don't get paid for that, but they still invest time and energy and allow me to do that. So I appreciate them doing that. But the other thing that right off the bat, they were like, we want you thinking about TV shows. And so their initial idea was things like game shows that could involve AI. And there's probably a lot of different ideas there, but I think that something like that, it probably goes stale quickly with how quickly AI capabilities move. Um, and I don't know how fun it is having like an LLM generate questions or something on air. Like it's kind of, I don't know. I don't know how connected people would feel that kind of show. So that kind of stuff didn't really work. But something that I did pitch them on, which is something I've been working on in the back of my head for a long time, is this idea of a TV show that gets people excited about the future. So this has been a recurring theme even in this episode, is that there's a lot of when you look at the news, social media, it is easy for one to feel overwhelmed by a sense of doom or dread or anxiety. I certainly get that feeling when I am scrolling. We even call it doom scrolling. When you're kind of just like going through your social media feed, where you're just like, oh my God, this place is being bombed, that place is being bombed, what's happened to democracy in yet another country. And so you have all these reasons to be trepidatious about the future. And even in our, I think maybe people who listen to your show are maybe less trepidatious about AI than the world in general. But if you're in Hollywood right now, you probably don't love AI. You see a threat there. So AI, other emerging technologies, where the world is going in general, it seems to be a cause of a lot of concern for a lot of people. So I don't want to go into too much detail right now, and things could change over time. But we've had a lot of traction with well-known production companies and streaming networks around a show that is optimistic about the future, and like my podcast, brings on experts to give a range of views on, okay, if this technology goes one way or another, we could be looking at dystopia or utopia. But across different emerging technologies like nuclear fusion, AI, quantum computing, how could these technologies converge over the coming decades to theoretically allow for paradise on Earth for everyone on the planet, where everyone on the planet, every single living being, or at least living human, doesn't have to worry about where their next meal is going to come from, doesn't need to worry about shelter over their heads, doesn't need to worry about a sense of fulfillment or community, or their language or culture being lost. There are myriad ways that AI combined with things like nuclear fusion could allow for this kind of utopic world to come about potentially in our lifetimes. And so, yeah, the show is about, yeah, various scenarios, various technologies, and how you, as a viewer of the show, can take concrete steps to help nudge us towards utopia instead of dystopia.
I am a fan of this already. I'm ready for the release date. I'm ready to watch this. I think that we need more of this in our environment for everyone, right? And I love the fact that you're expanding the audience because to me technology and even AI is not about people who work in the field, right? Who code. It's something that touches all of our lives. And so that's what I'm such a fan of for individuals is to talk to people who are outside of your industry because it's going to touch them too in some shape and form. So I'm so happy that you're expanding your audience and you're bringing some positive perspective in this. And hopefully, most importantly, I think it's going to inspire people in terms of, wow, this is what I could be a part of in creating because we really just have this amazing tool at our fingertips and we are the orchestrators to determine how do we want to use it and create with it. So if you can inspire more people to create this utopia future, I will be more than happy. So I'm cheering you on for the background. I hope to see you in the number one spot in Netflix or on Amazon Prime or wherever it may show. So, congratulations.
Well, possibly early congratulations there, but I'm glad you like the concept, Sadie. And it has been wild how some people we've been pitching it to are just like, wow, this is great. I want to be associated with it. So hopefully we can keep that momentum going. And yeah, don't have any timings or specifics. So many things in play right now, but that is what I'm excited about. And yeah, thank you so much, Sadie, for having me on the show and letting me access your audience. It's funny, you and I usually have a lot of laughs on air, and we haven't been laughing as much. It seems like kind of serious content today.
Very serious, except talking about, a new future where everybody has all their needs met. I mean, that's not too serious, but pretty positive. So,
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, it's amazing to be on. The Data Bytes podcast has been an amazing show for a long time with a lot of incredible guests. So I'm honored to have been invited and be able to have this conversation with you, even if it is more serious than usual between us. There's a For listeners out there, we've done at least 3 episodes with you on the Super Data Science podcast, including something that we've gotten into the trend of is having you be the first guest episode of every year to give us your insights into what the coming year holds for us as data scientists and people working in AI. And those have been some of the most popular episodes of all time on Super Data Science, are your episodes. It's like something like, this is approximate. I'm not like, I don't have the data in front of me, but it's something like 2 or 3 of the 5 most popular episodes of all time are episodes with you in it, Sadie. So, and we have a lot of laughs in those. So people, I have proof.
So we'll have you back on a laughing show to discuss more of the comedy special. Like, those shows have inspired me because I'm getting ready to write my July newsletter. And I'm thinking about doing a mid-year predictions because I think almost all the ones that I predicted at the beginning of the year have already come true. And I'm like, we're in 6-month iteration cycles in the world of data science and AI. We may need to do these every 6 months. So maybe I'll have you back on first for this and we can talk about mid-year predictions. So
Anytime, Sadie. It's always a joy to spend time with you. I always learn so much myself, and yeah, it's an honor.
well, thank you, John. And if you are not listening to the Super Data Science podcast, I highly encourage you to, along with checking out John's book and also his classes, and give him a follow on X and LinkedIn so you can stay up to date with all his great updates. Thank you, John. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And a big thank you to all our listeners. Remember to stay curious and keep learning. And we'll catch you next time on the Data Bytes podcast. Bye-bye, everybody. If you are enjoying the conversations you are hearing today, we encourage you to continue to be a part of the conversation and join a community of like-minded, extraordinary women. With our free community membership, you're stepping into a realm where learning, networking, and growth are at the heart and soul of what we do. Connect with Women in Data's global community and network with our chapters all for free. But why stop there? Upgrade your membership with a special offer for Data Bytes listeners by getting $20 off a pro membership, in which you'll receive access to over 300 classes, leadership training, and exclusive events. If you're interested in mentorship and networking, we've got you. From monthly thought leadership webinars to exclusive networking events and a diverse on-demand mentorship program, the connections you'll make here are boundless. Join us and be part of a vibrant network. Dive into our book clubs, growth groups, and industry-focused gatherings. Women in Data is not just a community. It's a movement, a place where innovators, changemakers, and leaders come together to shape the future. Visit womenindata.org to join or use the special discount code in the show notes. Together, let's drive change one data byte at a time.